So you want to buy a baby elephant. I mean, who doesn't, right? So you go down to the baby elephant store and you say, "Yeah, I'll take that one there." And you bring it home and you put it in the backyard. And before you know it, it starts wandering around the neighborhood. So you go back to the baby elephant store and go, "Dude, what am I going to do?" And this baby elephant salesperson says, "Oh yeah, you need this chain and this stake if you don't have a fenced yard." So you bring your baby elephant home and you put a chain around its leg and you stake him to the ground, and that way he doesn't run all over the neighborhood, and that works fine. But at some point the baby elephant grows up and doesn't realize that he's now stronger than the chain and the stake. He's learned to stay in the backyard. And I feel like a lot of companies I encounter have that problem. We set up all these processes 3 or 4, 5, 8 years ago, and now we're a bigger company, or we're a different company, or we've adopted new methodologies, and yet we haven't really changed our system. And that's why I find a lot of product planning is in total chaos. And so my question for you today is, if your process isn't, it's not really a question, is it? The statement today is, if your process isn't achieving its desired outcomes, then it's time to change your process. And in fact, Ed Deming said, if you can't describe what you're doing as a process, you don't know what you're doing. And a lot of us don't. In a survey from last year, 47% indicated that process was the biggest challenge for product management in their company. And in all areas, they have an ad hoc life cycle process, they have an ill-defined innovation process, and mostly they have inconsistent process for managing the portfolio. Everybody does it differently. And as a result, products get released through individual heroics, despite the process. It seems to me that if it weren't for the heroic efforts of the product manager and the dev lead and the product marketing people, despite the company's best effort to prevent it, it's like we would never get products out. So we need some process. Now, I worked for a large company. It was huge. It was $1 billion software company. We had so much process, we couldn't get anything done. And I got recruited into a startup, and I went there and I was super excited about it because there's no process in the way. We can just do whatever. And a week later, I was pulling my hair out because, oh my gosh, there's no process here. So we need some process. We need something more than a cocktail napkin to go from idea to success. And unfortunately, one of the things that I'm seeing right now that is really bothersome is a continued mindset, particularly in executives, that building products is factory work. You just wait for their wonderful ideas to come by on the assembly line, and you plug a few things together out of a library, and boom, you have a product. And over the last few years, we've done a really good job of proceduralizing the describing the product and creating the product by implementing things like design thinking and story mapping and agile methods and SAFe, which I don't really consider an agile method. But you know what we haven't done? We've really focused on create. We haven't focused so much on discovery of problems and successful delivery. With today's methods, we can create the wrong product faster than ever. And what I'm hearing from my customers is we've perfected the build process. We've got DevOps in place. We're doing Agile. The team is working better than ever. And now we're realizing we're building the wrong product. And let me say, let me make a note on this particular knife. This has become a trope. I mean, I've seen it in many presentations. I've been using this example for quite a while. I think it's hysterical. It feels like every enterprise product I have ever seen. And you can see it. It's like the sales guy said, oh, I talked to a guy who wants a screwdriver on the knife. I talked to a guy who wants pliers on the knife. I talked to somebody who wants a whatever, and we keep adding and adding and adding. But the truth of this knife is this is actually a photograph. It's not a drawing. It's not a prototype. For their 100th anniversary, the Swiss Army people made about 1,000 knives with every blade they had ever made, with the intent of selling it like to a knife store, which would have been really cool, right? And so I thought, well, hell, I'm going to go buy one of these things. And my wife said, well, why? I mean, it's super expensive. And secondly, you can't take it anywhere. I mean, you wouldn't be able to get it through security. And third, it wouldn't actually be any good in any of its functions. I mean, you couldn't actually use it. And it feels to me like our processes today lean this way. This is the feature factory mindset. The sales guy who comes in and says, I might be able to close a deal if you commit to add this feature. The executive who stops by and says, God spoke to me in a dream and we've got to have this feature. Feature. And we don't seem to have a process that looks at what are we actually trying to accomplish and for whom. Rogers and Edgett back in 2012 said simply having a process is itself a best practice. But the thing is, other people's processes may not be what's best for you. So when I ask people how they describe their product process, they use terms like ad hoc, inconsistent, sometimes standard. And so what happens is we'll hire somebody new in the PMO or somebody who's got a lot of project management experience, and they say, okay, great, let's build a process. And it almost always looks like this. We'll do step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. We'll have all these gates along the way. We're going to have these phases. We're going to have these meetings and ceremonies and artifacts. And we'll have all this perfect information and political buy-in from everybody. It'll be great. And the problem with this sort of linear way of thinking is learning occurs only at the beginning and the end. And there's so much in the middle where we are basing our decisions based on old learning. And so a few years ago, we all jumped on the train for Lean Startup. And Lean Startup says, well, okay, let's just build some stuff. We'll measure how it does. We'll learn from that. We'll build some more stuff. But the thing is, there's more to product than build. So I recast this thing into these phases. We go through a discovery phase, a describe phase, and a deliver phase. With discovery, you're trying to find problems to solve. And I can't believe I've been saying this for 25 years, but the core of our decisions need to be problems. And yet everybody in our organization brings us features. Can you build me this feature? Can you build me this feature? And half the time, as a developer, as a former developer, I don't even know what they're asking for. So it's hard for me to implement something when all I have is a how statement. What I need is understanding of the problem. Then we need to describe that problem to our creation teams around the concept of personas and their problems. And then we're ready to prepare delivering those solutions to market. And at the core is continuous learning. You discover and learn, you describe and learn, you deliver and learn. And then in between these steps, after you discover, you get your organization to commit with business deliverables. And that is to say, we're getting ready to go do this thing. Do I have funding? We're getting ready to go do this thing. Do I have resources? And then we describe the solution and we're ready to start creating. And then we prepare to deliver the product so that ultimately we can connect with our customers and increase the adoption and growth of our product. And again, learning is at the core. It's always a good time to interview clients, perform retrospectives, and optimize your processes. So what I've shared with you, we have come to call the QuartzOpen framework. We built it with a team of independent consultants like myself. You can learn more about the QuartzOpen framework at, interestingly, QuartzOpenFramework.com. And the thing is, you're probably building products similar to this, but you're likely to have one product in the definition stage and one product in the description stage and one product in the delivery stage. So it's not like you always start at the beginning, because there is no beginning. It's a ring, right? I remember years ago, I was brought on board to launch a product, and I was talking to the development team, and I said, why are you bringing me on now? And they said, well, to be honest with you, we just want somebody to blame when this goes badly. As our company grows larger, we start specializing our roles, and we might have multiple products in the discovery and commit phase. And we might have multiple products that are being built and prepared for market, and then another bunch that are preparing for launch. So you'll have multiple iterations within each phase. So this framework is kind of like a method of methods. So we have, like, in the describe and create phase, we've got design thinking and story mapping and agile methods. In the go-to-market or the connect stuff, you have your sales methods and your marketing methods and your launch methods. And so this plugs into a lot of the methods that you're using today. And it provides us, I think, a logical structure that you can use to define a 21st century process. Serious Decisions reported a few years ago that high growth organizations are twice as likely as low growth ones to have and use standard deliverables in the innovation and go-to-market process. So what are your standard deliverables? And here's the tool. Taking this chart, looking at the different colors there, what is your process? And said differently, interesting. First, we want to discover problems, then we want to commit to solve them, then we want to describe the problems, design and build solutions, prepare the organization to launch the product, and then ultimately connect with the product. And how do you know what to fill in? Well, the answer is you're doing all of these things. You're doing a bunch of product-related activities and more and more and more and more. And you just write down all the things that you're doing and use that tool to organize them into a logical process. After all these years, many firms still lack clarity on what product management should do, and so we end up doing everything. And the good news is there are lots of good product management frameworks. And some of these people are exhibiting here at this conference. And you can look at these frameworks and say, well, yeah, we need to do this and this and this and this and this, and then put them into your process. So use this canvas as a way of defining what are the standard deliverables for your process from idea to market. Let me take a pause here because I talked a lot. Let me open it up to some questions. Anybody have some notes they want to have me speak to?
So from the chat, I've not seen any question come up.
Okay.
Just a
And Hector said many companies fail to retire products. And I think that's partially because we fail to continue learning, right? We start learning from our win-loss analysis and from our product metrics that this product isn't doing well. So we need to go through this whole cycle again. We've discovered this problem. What are we going to do? We're going to get executives to commit to retiring the product. And that means we're going to have to describe all the mechanics of how we're going to do that and walk around this wheel step by step for a launch that is really an unlaunch, right? Retiring a product. So this is the, sure.
Just the interaction of the chart here, the side kind of repeats the same that's in the hexagons. I'm trying to figure out what is the interaction between the boxes and the hexagons, because they're basically the same.
They are the same, and I'm gonna show you that actually on the next slide. Okay. So hey, nice setup, well done. So using this canvas, I worked with a team for an enterprise SaaS product, and this is what they called out. They had 3 or 4 or 5 things in each category. As they looked at their activities and they looked at their ceremonies and they looked at their primary deliverables, you can walk around this framework and see in the discover column, they do, customer discovery, which we've all, I hope, heard of. We define the problem. They do a thing called opportunity scoring. And from that, they build a product canvas. And they take the product canvas to the leadership team to do an executive briefing and say, hey, shall I take this thing further? And then they go into more detailed market validation, financial model, clarifying their success criteria or their OKRs, and then they do a full business plan. And so if you think about all of the activities that you're doing, or think about all of the activities that need doing, they should fit nicely into one of these areas. And the work that I do is working with teams to define those steps. What are those key elements? And so I've developed this thing I call the no chaos process, because again, so many of us are pretty chaotic and inconsistent in the way we build things. So we start by interviewing and observing customers, really face-to-face or video face-to-face, so that we can isolate problems and personas. And then we identify our abilities to solve those using a technique called Aspire. Then we brief our executive teams and say, I found this problem. I'd like the go-ahead to take it to the next level. And I've built this one pager that describes what this problem opportunity is for you to say, go, no go. And then I'll go into doing, whatever business planning is necessary, but at minimum, creating a one-page canvas, calculating the opportunity score so I can compare multiple things, and then getting the go-ahead to engage with development. Then we go into describe, with describing problems and personas, defining the acceptance criteria for each of the stories, road mapping your epics or your initiatives, and then briefing the technical teams. And they go off and start building. And here we get into, looking at what will a successful release look like. We'll use Kanban to prioritize the work. We'll formalize discovery and acceptance, and then we'll minimize interference and change. One of the biggest issues that product managers can contribute to, I said that wrong. One of the biggest contributions product managers can make during the create phase is to tell everybody to just shut the hell up for a while. One of my favorite stories, I was working with a president who said, our development team is terrible. You've got to fix it. And so I went to development and found out what was really going on was the president was coming in every week and saying, all right, stop what you're working on. I'm giving you, here are some new requirements. The problem wasn't with development at all. Then we get into preparing to deliver to market, where we'll align our launches with market rhythms. We'll determine what's necessary for our launch activities. We'll use Kanban to prioritize the launch work the same way we did the creation work. And then we'll brief our go-to-market team so that they can ultimately connect with the market. And then we'll set up market feedback. We'll monitor our success metrics and our OKRs. And then product marketing will do win-loss analysis to see what's working and what isn't. And then at the end of that process, we'll perform a process retrospective and then do it all again. So that's my definition of a it seems like a lot, but it isn't really a lot, a pretty simple process for going from idea to market in an unchaotic way. And the challenge for you is to say, well, what do we need to do? I mean, here's the thing. Other people's best practices are not necessarily the best for you. Just because the company across the street did it a certain way doesn't really matter unless it works for you. What I found is that every company is unique. Different people, different goals, different vision, different products. And so your process should be unique as well. So looking at all the activities that we talked about earlier that we typically do in product management, all of them find a home somewhere in your canvas. And what I want to do is, ultimately, your goal in product management is to systematically turn good ideas into successful products following the smallest amount of process you can get away with. You want to have a quick memory. I was working with a team, actually, whose company name you would recognize. They had a 27-page diagram of their ideation process from idea to market, and nobody could remember any of the details. It was horrific. And they simplified it to something more like what I described in my no chaos process. Now, this process is also described in my book, Turn Ideas into Products, where I talk about this way of thinking, as well as implementing a consistent policing role, if you will, called product ops. That is to say, product ops is emerging as a role similar to DevOps that is focused on helping larger teams become consistent in their deliverables. So you can learn more about that book on my website at turnideasintoproducts.info. And that's how you innovate your planning process. You start over. You say, you know what, what's been working here and what hasn't been working? Let's start doing more of the stuff that's working and stop doing some of the things that aren't working. Well, the best way to discover is to actually have a conversation with a real person. The number one way to get good market feedback is by observing a customer trying to do their jobs with or without your product. The second way is interviewing them. And actually, interestingly, the third great source of market information is the product team, the development team. They know so many ways to improve the experience for customers, as long as the product manager has made it clear who the customer actually is. The three least reliable ways are executive mandates, ideas from the sales team, and the company portal for ideas. And I had an experience a few years ago that was hysterical. The president announced in one of my training sessions, the president announced that any idea was a great idea, put it in the portal, and the product managers will all build a business case for every idea. And I was standing next to one of the lead developers who burst out laughing and leaned over to me and said, oh yeah, product management's never leaving the building again. They're just going to be working on business cases all day long. So the best way to get discovery, the best way to do customer discovery is to spend time with customers, firsthand experience. I would use this process for anything large enough to require additional investment. That is to say, we want to add, a simple feature to the next release. That just goes through traditional backlog grooming that would happen within the describe and create phase. But we're getting ready to completely rethink the product, or we're moving from on-prem to in the cloud, or we've got a new product idea. So any super large epic, or any new product idea, or maybe a product idea that's ultimately going to be an option to an existing product, warrants going through this. But you know what? It doesn't have to be development work. It could be marketing work. I mean, we could go through that same process saying, you know what, we need to build a new website. And you're like, okay, well, why do we need to do that? What is the problem that we're trying to solve? Let's get commitment from leadership that we should go ahead and do that. Let's describe it to our agency that's going to build our website. They're going to create it. We're going to prepare the market. We're going to prepare the sales team. Then we're going to launch it. So the metaphor seems to work for almost any substantial sized project. I would use it for large features and initiatives. Yeah, I would use it for something that is epic or bigger. This was the model I showed for an enterprise SaaS size company. And this is the model that I showed for, this is the model that I showed for my own process, the no chaos process. I'm Steve Johnson. My company is Under 10 Consulting. I hope to stay connected with you.